child. And what scares me even more now that I'm 39 years old is artificial intelligence, because so the big question is, what is it actually going to do for this country and for the world, really? Should we be scared? Should we embrace it? Is it going to solve all our problems? Are our jobs going to disappear? Certainly Rishi Sunak was talking about it this week, and let's just see a little bit of what he was talking about.
AI could make it easier to build chemical or biological weapons. Terrorist groups could use AI to spread fear and destruction on an even greater scale. Criminals could exploit AI for cyber attacks, disinformation, fraud, or even child sexual abuse. And in the most unlikely but extreme cases, there is even the risk that humanity could lose control of AI completely.
I mean, that's pretty scary stuff in there. Let's talk to Professor Peter Bannister, who is chairman of the Institution of Engineering and Technology Healthcare Panel. Professor Bannister, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on talkTV today. How scared should we be?
Probably not as scared as people would be after watching that short clip. So great to speak to you. So look, just putting my cards on the table, I grew up watching films like The Terminator, so I totally understand why people can gravitate towards assuming that AI is bad.
But I mean, it's a reasonable thought, given that the Prime Minister is scaring the bejesus out of us talking about chemical and biological weapons being set up through AI.
Yes. I mean, definitely, it doesn't fill me with comfort hearing him talk about things like that. But I think what it's doing is motivating action as well as discussion around how we regulate AI. So AI comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. I've been working on AI for over 20 years. You have to go back 30 years before you find the first bit of technology that uses AI that was actually approved for use in a healthcare setting by the regulators. So it's not new, but obviously what many people have seen over the last 6 months has been more awareness around AI. ChatGPT, which people may know, so it's this software that can actually help draw conclusions from data. So you can ask it to write a summary on a topic, and it's very convincing, and in most cases quite accurate. So it's got to the point where it's much more in the public consciousness, because quite honestly, it seems like it's going to be useful to all of us. There was a report published last week which said, what is going to lead to what's known as this emergent risk from AI, so the Terminator scenario. So AI takes over, starts thinking for us. And it comes down to failure. There would need to be failures in a number of areas. Lack of oversight, leaving it in the hands of one organization who's not properly qualified to manage it and regulate it, or just leaving it on its own to develop and learn over time, what sometimes is called the black box model, where you get to a point where we as humans can't explain why AI is deciding the things or saying the things that it is based on the information we're giving it. So we're at a point now where we can get ahead of that and make sure that we are regulating the use of AI. And for me as an engineer, I don't think regulation is a bad thing. I like regulation because it means that if I follow the regulations, I know that the product I build is going to be safe and effective, because I don't want to find that out at the end after I put a lot of hard work into building a new technology.
What is it called? I can't remember, Peter. Well, there's a word for it when AI gets it wrong. I was chatting to a guy on the plane last night, was coming back from Northern Ireland actually, who was telling me he's an engineer as well and deals with AI. It's like hypothecation or something. Hallucination. That's right. Gets it wrong. Yeah. So does it sort of learn from that if you point out that hallucination?
It can do, but it won't necessarily unless you design it to do that. So look, AI is a tool at the end of the day, and like any other tool, people need to understand what it can and can't do. So one of the roles the IET have is to explain to the general public, but also government policymakers, what it really can do. Let's not get hung up on an extreme hypothetical.
Sure.
The risk, but it's the problem with ChatGPT, these hallucinations, is that I'm not a medical doctor, so I could ask ChatGPT to answer me a question that a doctor would be able to answer, and it would come back in a way that was very convincing to me because I'm relying on it as an expert. So
apparently, it still thinks Boris Johnson is Prime Minister as well.
Well, yes. Well, I mean, and that's it. And sometimes we know that it's wrong, but. Mm-hmm. But the point where you have to be an expert to know that it's wrong.
Of course, yeah, like something medical. I mean, it's a really, really good example, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think in healthcare it's interesting because I think we're at a point where we can probably use technologies like that to help healthcare professionals manage large amounts of data more easily, help provide more personalized treatments to patients. But it's still on the basis that there's an expert in the loop. There's a doctor reviewing what ChatGPT or the AI is saying and going, hang on, that makes no sense because I'm an expert. There is an efficiency saving there, but we're not completely handing over all of the decision-making, all of the action to the AI. And there's a phrase that's used, which is upskilling. So in the healthcare area where I work, we're not trying to replace doctors or healthcare professionals, but what we're trying to do is make the people who are out there, whether they're community workers or carers or the individual patients, more able to get better healthcare by closing the gap between them and, as we know, the hospitals that are under huge demand at the moment, maybe the long time it takes to develop new drugs, using the technology to try and speed things up, take out the uncertainty, but not completely swap it into a state where computers are doing everything instead of expert humans.
Dawn has been in touch on text. He says, Peter, how do we know that AI hasn't already taken over the world? It is super clever and could have lulled humans into a false sense of security, says Dawn. I suppose that's a bit like when you mentioned watching The Terminator and so on earlier, Peter. I mean, it's a bit like The Truman Show. Everybody watches The Truman Show and thinks, is my life actually The Truman Show? I want to ask you another facetious question, Peter, and then I'll let you go. This might be just ridiculously simplistic, but actually you've explained this really, really well to me, and I wish you'd been my science teacher because you're very good at explaining things. But is this just a little bit like the internet, in that at the start, when people were kind of getting the internet, realizing they thought, oh, this is all terrible and there are all these terrible things in the internet, but actually the internet also allows us to do incredible things, has changed the whole way we work. We're talking as we are due to you being on Zoom via the internet now. I mean, it is revolutionized. I mean, I remember when I first used the internet when I was 14 years old, and now I mean, it's everywhere. We don't even think about it. We don't even say online really much anymore. Is AI just going to be that sort of part of the revolution that actually it just becomes part of our life, and actually it can be very helpful, but there are dangers as well? Should we view it in that way?
I think it's a great comparison. A lot of the optimists compare it to the Industrial Revolution. So it totally changed the way that people work, the kind of jobs they do. If we look at ChatGPT, one of the concerns was that people can now use ChatGPT to answer their exam questions. So what that should prompt is to say, okay, great, now everyone's got access to these tools. We shouldn't be testing them on their ability to do a task that we can now get software to do. We should be moving the conversation on. We should be saying, what new things can we do as society, as civilization, because we've now managed to automate these things in the same way as we're not running between cities, we're getting in cars, getting in trains now, which we weren't a couple of 100 years ago. So, but I think to do that and to make sure that everything moves in a positive direction, we need to be very open about how the technology works. We can't hide behind buzzwords. AI is a very general term. It covers lots of different things and lots of different outcomes and interpretations. So the ongoing task is for people like us, the technical people, to keep having those conversations with the public, with government, to make sure that they understand at a practical level, because ultimately what motivates me is collaborating. I want a doctor or a patient to tell me what problems they want me to help them solve. Yeah. I'm not the expert in their problem. So we need to have that conversation.
Speaking of questions, and just briefly if you would, otherwise we're going to crash the break. Cliff in Berkshire says, please ask the Prof. I play a lot of chess and have seen chess computers and programs become better and better over the last 30 years. Are these examples of AI?
Yes, I mean, that's definitely an example. It goes from being able to, I can't tell you exactly how you win a game of chess, but in its most simple case, AI is something that repeats a task that we already understand how to solve very easily. Yep. Pushing it forwards, it's about finding new molecules that might lead to better drugs, which a human can't do, or in this case, solving chess, solving Go. Not everyone can do that, and probably in some cases, no one can do it. So yes, absolutely.
Peter, you know those sort of academic roles that are like a professor of public understanding of science. Can you go for one of those? Because honestly, you've just educated me more than anybody else, anything I've ever read or heard about AI. That's been really, really interesting. We'll definitely have you back on again if you're willing to come on. So thank you very much indeed, Peter Bannister there. Professor Peter Bannister is chairman of the Institute of Engineering and Technology Healthcare panel. That was really, really fascinating.